Johnson family lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind with neatly trimmed lawns, matching mailboxes, and HOA rules that seemed to cover everything from the color of your house to the height of your grass. Sarah Johnson, a teacher, and her husband Mark, an engineer, had always dreamed of creating a small vegetable garden. They wanted a place where their kids, Emily and Jack, could learn about nature, eat fresh food, and spend more time outdoors. Their backyard was too shaded by tall oak trees, so they chose a sunny patch in their front yard. Over the spring, Sarah and Mark worked hard turning that little patch of grass into a vibrant garden. They planted rows of tomatoes, cucumbers, peppers, and herbs. Emily helped paint wooden signs with labels like basil and mint, while Jack watered the seedlings every afternoon. Soon, the garden became the heart of their home. Neighbors walking by often stopped to admire it. Children loved picking cherry tomatoes, and older residents smiled at the cheerful sight of bright red peppers growing under the sun. But not everyone was impressed. One morning, Sarah found an envelope taped to their front door. It was a notice from the HOA. The letter stated clearly, "Remove unauthorized vegetable garden from front yard within 10 days, or face a fine of $250 per day." Sarah's heart sank. She wasn't running a business or causing trouble. It was just a small garden, but the HOA saw it as a violation of community uniformity. To them, lawns were meant to be lawns, not mini farms. That evening, Sarah and Mark sat at the kitchen table reading the letter again and again. "This is ridiculous," Mark muttered, frustration in his voice. "We're teaching our kids about healthy food, about responsibility, about community. And they call this a violation?" Sarah sighed deeply. "It feels so unfair. The neighbors love it. Why can't they?" Emily, listening from the hallway, asked innocently, "Are they going to take away our tomatoes?" Her words pierced Sarah's heart. She hugged her daughter tightly and whispered, "No, sweetheart, we won't let that happen." The days that followed were tense. Karen-like voices on the HOA board argued that front yard gardens looked messy and could lower property values. But many neighbors disagreed. Some signed a petition in support of the Johnsons, saying the garden brought joy and even inspired them to eat healthier. One elderly neighbor remarked, "That garden is the most cheerful thing on this street. Why punish kindness?" Slowly, the neighborhood was split into two sides, those who valued strict rules and those who believed in community freedom. The Johnsons refused to give up. Sarah spent hours researching and discovered something important. Their state had recently passed right to garden laws. These laws protected families who wanted to grow food on their own property, even in HOA communities. Armed with this information, Sarah contacted a local attorney who confirmed that the HOA had no legal right to enforce the removal of the garden. Encouraged, the Johnsons decided to fight back. Then came the turning point. A local news station picked up the story. The headline read, "Family faces $250 daily fine for vegetable garden." Cameras filmed Sarah and Mark tending to their garden while Emily and Jack harvested cucumbers. Sarah spoke passionately on camera. "This isn't just about vegetables. It's about teaching our children where food comes from, about living sustainably, about sharing with neighbors. How can that be against the rules?" The story struck a chord. Soon it was shared on social media, and thousands of people expressed outrage. The HOA was suddenly under immense pressure. Angry emails poured in, and even families outside the community voiced their support for the Johnsons. The board tried to hold a closed meeting to discuss the issue, but dozens of neighbors showed up demanding answers. "Why are you punishing a family for growing food?" one man shouted. Another woman added, "If we can have decorative flowers, why not edible ones? Isn't food just as beautiful?" The board members struggled to respond as the crowd's frustration grew. Mark stood up and calmly addressed the group. "We're not asking for special treatment. We just want the freedom to use our yard for something good. Our children are learning responsibility. Our neighbors are enjoying fresh produce. This garden brings us together. It does not divide us." His words were met with loud applause, drowning out the gavel of the HOA president. Weeks later, the pressure became too much for the HOA to ignore. Between the state law, the media coverage, and the overwhelming support of the community, they had no choice but to back down. The $250 daily fine was canceled, and the HOA quietly revised its rules to allow small, well-kept vegetable gardens in front yards. It was a victory not just for the Johnsons, but for the entire neighborhood. On a bright Saturday morning, Sarah and Mark hosted a garden day to celebrate. Families came with baskets, kids laughed while picking fresh cucumbers, and neighbors shared recipes for homemade salsa and herb bread. The smell of basil and mint filled the air. Even some of the neighbors who had originally opposed the garden admitted they were glad it remained. The Johnsons' little patch of vegetables had become a symbol of resilience, passion, and community spirit. For Sarah, the garden was never just about food. It was about growth for her plants, her children, and her community. As she watched Emily proudly hand a basket of tomatoes to a smiling neighbor, Sarah realized that sometimes the smallest seeds could lead to the biggest changes. Their fight wasn't just about vegetables. It was about proving that kindness, sustainability, and togetherness always matter more than rigid rules on paper.